hello. Good day, good afternoon, wherever you're watching this, whatever time. My name is Mariam Obaijoko, and welcome to the Laureate Conversation, where we sit down with amazing, remarkable authors across the world. And today's guest, today's guest is someone I've been looking forward to talk to. She's a writer whose work feels deeply personal. It's reflective, emotional, and profoundly human. Our award-winning autobiography, Belonging, finding tribes and meaning. Finding tribes of meaning explores identity, family, faith, trauma, just a lot of things, friendship, romance, healing, loneliness, sense of belonging. You can just name it, just if you want to learn about life, just learn about the reality of life for someone who have lived through it. This is a book for you. This is the book for you. We're going to talk about this book, so just bear with us, sit down, listen, whatever you want to do, just make sure you listen to this because we have a lot to talk about. So, from navigating adolescence in South Africa to wrestling with insecurity, emotional survivor, family dynamics, spirituality, this memoir speaks to something universal in all of us, to be honest. So, please welcome the winner of the Best Autobiography category at the 2026 African Laureate Award, Alison Weihe. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Quite
Thank you.
surreal, I must say, but deeply moving. Deeply moving that my story moved others.
Yes, it did. It does. It did still. So, okay. So before we get started, I'd like
Yes.
to play a little game. It's my warm-up
Yes.
game. It's
Yes.
called This or That. Yes, it's a game. It's just something very simple. I'm just going to ask a question and you're going to just respond. So the first one is this or that. So I'm going to start that one right now. Then towards the end of the show, I'm going to play another one, which is Would You Rather? So are you ready for the first one?
Yes.
Okay. This or that, writing in silence or writing with music?
Writing in silence.
Okay.
Total focus.
Fiction. Yeah, I understand. The next one, fiction or non-fiction?
I would like to
Did
say
you get
both,
that?
but yes, I do.
Oh, both. Is it when it comes to reading or writing?
Yes. I would say non-fiction.
Reading or writing?
Writing.
It's interesting. Yeah, I can like that. Okay. So, this or that, city life or nature retreats?
Nature retreats. Unquestionably.
I thought as much. I guess I just knew you were going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Past memories or future dreams?
Future dreams. That's visioning.
Okay. So, a lifelong companionship or privacy?
Lifelong companionship.
So, lastly, belonging somewhere or belonging to yourself first?
Belonging to yourself first.
I
Because
feel
that's
like
the only
this
way
whole
you can belong
question.
to others. In a way.
Yes, you have to
That's
have
how
a
you
sense
belong
of
to
belonging.
others. Yeah.
True. I think this game I already have a little information about you, But let's just get to it. Let's get started. Let's get to it. First of all, congratulations once again on winning your book. It's worth it, to be honest. I mean, it feels like I'm a lover of novels, but when I was reading your book, it felt so, it just felt so easy to read. It did not feel like a memoir about I'm reading about someone. It just felt like I'm reading about a character who went through all the stages a fictional book could go through, the character development from the
Mm.
adolescent to the adulthood. It's very interesting, so it's worth it. So let me just can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Alison beyond the pages of belonging?
I am a woman on a journey, a
Hmm.
lifelong journey of deepening my understanding of why I came to Earth. And so I think the learning never stops. I'm a mother, a wife, a friend to many, a mentor to some. I've been mentored by incredible people. And I continue to dive deeper and deeper, stripping away the layers of identity to find deeper forms of my identity. I think that's the essence of who I am.
I love that. I love that. Love that. So, I mean, how long have you been writing? Because what I read, it's not just your first time writing. How long have you been writing? Have you always been a lover of autobiography? Do you like writing poems, things like that?
It's interesting because when I was younger, I was a political journalist. I always loved writing at school. My school teacher at school really instilled in me a love of imagery and meaning, the meaning behind words. And I was a political journalist when I was younger. First a political activist, then a political journalist. But I never really thought I was a great writer. And so, my story. And at a certain point, when I'd gone into deep shame about something in my life, I stopped writing. And my writing was very on the surface. And then at the age of 60, a lot of things happened in my life, and I was at a crossroads. And I attended a global convention, and I heard speakers on the stage that touched my life to the core. And I realized that words can change people. And my life, some speakers changed my life from the stage. And that's when I truly understood the power of words. And then after that, I wrote a compilation. I wrote a chapter in another book that was putting the foot in the water. And then I wrote the first version of my book. And then I wrote a second version of my book. And I still didn't quite claim that it was our writer until I got your message that I'd been nominated.
Hmm.
And that was the moment I truly felt, well, writing is the deepest form of my identity. And when I speak, I'm a writer that speaks rather than a speaker that writes for kind of credibility and authority. I feel writing is at the deepest
Hmm.
core of who I am. So that's my writing story. For 30 years, I never wrote much because I was steeped in the shame of my
Mhm.
story. But I had to write through the shame. I had to walk and write through the shame to arrive on the other side to say, and only today, with you, can I say, I am a writer. And it's the most beautiful thing in
Oh,
my world.
wow. Oh, that's very, very touching. That's very because when I read your book, I felt like you've written so much because it was very descriptive, very narrative. It felt like someone like a writer who have written all over the years and decided like, you know what? Let me write about myself too. I think I'm a character. So you telling me that this is like you just actually writing for yourself. It feels very touching. You are an incredible writer, I must say. Well done. Well done. It's not even about, we're going to talk about the personal attachment that comes with writing an autobiography. But I mean, talking about writing itself as a technical, ability, that's well done. So well done. Okay, so speaking of writing a book, memoirs requires a different kind of courage because you're not hiding behind fictionalist
I
character.
know.
You're writing about you. How emotional was that for you? How did that scare you as a person?
It terrified me. Not
Hmm.
scared, terrified. And my greatest fear was, what will my family think? I don't want to expose them. I want to write with love, but I want to tell my story with the rawness and realness that it deserves, because that's, I think,
Hmm.
what moves people. But my greatest fear was, and then, so I had to kind of leap through that fear. And becoming part of the speaker community really gave me courage. My speaking community and
Hmm.
my book coach, I had two different book coaches, but the main book coach was the second book. And that was the final book that I was proud of. The first version, I actually did a first version of the book and I wasn't happy with it. And I completely redid it and did a second. I think I must be the most strangest author you've ever had, because I actually wrote one version and it was too superficial. And I knew in my soul, the story was deeper. So then I had the courage to work with an incredible book coach and it went way deeper. So that was the journey of deepening the story.
Hmm. That's amazing. It's amazing. Well done. So let's talk about the title. Belonging. What does
Yes.
belonging mean to you? What does it mean to
I,
you? And how did you even get to that title?
I searched my whole life to belong. And when I was younger, I didn't feel
Hmm.
like I belonged. But then when I became a political activist, I felt like I belonged in that community. And they gave me so much love, unconditional love. It was life changing for me. But then through the shame that you know about in the book, I lost my
Hmm.
courage a little bit. And it was only through that global summit when I heard other incredible speakers speak about their life journey
Yeah.
that it was like somebody said, "You have a story to tell." It was like this young woman peered
Hmm.
into my soul in the auditorium and said, "You have a story to tell." And from that, at the age of 60, I was at a crossroads in my life. And that was the moment when, and I also did a 10-day silent retreat where on the last evening, I felt it was like a message from God saying, "You need to tell your story." And then I went to the global summit and I heard this young, wonderful young woman speak, who's now a global visionary on emotional intelligence. And she was just riveting, not your traditional speaker at all. She sat on the edge of the stage and said, "Who here is lonely?" And so she started telling the
Hmm.
story. And out of that grew the courage that I too had a story that I had kept hidden for 30 years. My family didn't even know the extent
Yes.
of my activism. They didn't. But it was
Wow.
courage was my breakthrough. Without courage, I could never have written this book. So I
Hmm.
had to jump over those hurdles of fear. I'm actually quite a shy, private person. And 3 times during the writing of this book, I've stood poised above the bin with my manuscript in hand, wanting to chuck it in the bin.
Mhm.
3 times. I thought, why am I doing this to myself?
Three
Nobody wants
times.
to know the anguish in my soul. And the third time, it was like a voice, a higher voice that just was just give it your all. Just give it your all. So I wrote
Just
this
do
book
it.
120%. 120%. I wrote it naked, no armor. You know, Brené Brown, vulnerability is really about no armor. I wrote it with no armor.
Hmm. Hmm. No, don't. I love how you were being honest, I think it's the really you've always been a writer because I mean it's writing comes with overthinking as well. Oh, how do I tell my
Oh, yeah.
story? Will people love this? It's just amazing and I'm glad you listened to that to that thing telling you have to go for it, because that was a very insightful book. So let's continue. Let's talk about how belonging itself was never about fitting into groups. When people say I want to have a sense of belonging, people think, okay, I want to fit in into groups. But sometimes, it's from your book, it was just about you finding out that the church you grew up with is not the one that gives you that sense of belonging. You felt a sense of belonging in another church. Sometimes it's a friendship, sometimes it's just nature. And you talked about you went for a political program that made you realize that, okay, I think I could do so much more for myself. Sometimes it's just simply being understood. So how did your definition of belonging change while writing this book and even after writing this book?
It's a wonderful question, because my sense of belonging deepened with every era and every chapter, because I was rooting in my body, in my cellular intelligence that I write about. That I was writing at a certain point, not from my head anymore, but right from inside. And I think that journey has deepened for me to finally own how all my insecurities actually damaged a lot of my world that I wasn't aware of. And as the journey deepened, it was like stripping the layers, onion layers, one after the other, going deeper into the kernel. And it was really like creating a sculpture with words. I started with a lump of clay, the messy, strange story of my life. And I chiseled and I shaped and I journeyed with the shame, and I journeyed with the pain, and I journeyed with the wisdom. And every bit chiseled that sculpture into the final book of belonging. So the journey deepened. And it came to the deepest identity that you've experienced me as a writer. But I had to write in order to become this writer. And that's why I encourage so many other people to tell the story in your soul. Tell the story in your soul, because it will make you whole. Sometimes you've got to leave what other people think, and just because you never know how your story is going to touch somebody else's life. And my story has touched other people's lives.
You never know.
And that's why I wrote it. I didn't write it to sell copy. Thank you. I didn't write it to sell copies. I didn't write it to create I wrote it because I wanted to honor the reason why I came to Earth, in this shape, in this form, and in the country of South Africa, and to represent the hope of Africa rising. That's why I wrote this book, not for myself, because it's not my story. It's actually our story.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Speaking of South Africa, you had a lot of life. You lived a lot of life in South Africa right from childhood. Right from the fact that you just felt like there was a lot even in the family. There was this. You spoke about how your dad was like heavily active till he had his moments. He had his mental illness, and how was that for you? And having a mom that was just going through it. How was that growing up like for you?
It was hard because it was an invisible process. Nobody knew what was happening at home. We hid it from everybody. And my father hid his illness. So, yes, so on the surface, he was this incredible visionary man, which he was. And what I try to show in the book, that he was not his illness. He was not defined by his illness. But what it did to me was it gave me enormous compassion for other people who battle mental health. And so this book is also a real tribute to the role he played in my life as a visionary, as an entrepreneur, as an activist swimming upstream. And I think I try to write about it in a beautiful way, in the same way that try to write about bulimia, in a beautiful way. How do you write about bulimia in a beautiful way? You find a way to package it with kindness. So some parts of the book I edited 17 times. It was a long, long journey over 4 years. So if there's refinement, it was because I so badly wanted it to be the purest version that would move people, and that would, it came from that space, I think. Wanting to honor what he brought to my life and what he represented. Yeah.
Speaking of him, I think when I read this part, I usually feel this sense of how important it is for every girl child to have a father figure in her life. Because that was a part where I felt deeply connected to the part where you mentioned your dad. There was a moment where you just like to be alone. Your siblings are doing well for themselves, and there was a time you just could not figure out what you wanted. And your dad took you out. He got a horse, and he got you a pony, and you just felt so alive, so free, and okay, this is what I actually love doing. It's very important. I really love that part. I don't know, for some reason I feel so connected to that part. I think what you just said added to the fact that fathers really play a major role in female lives. I mean, in the male child life of the boy. I mean, as women, the kind of mentorship, the kind of companionship our father gives us is also very important and can shape our relationship and every other life we have. I think that's a very beautiful relationship you've had with your father. Despite what you went through, he was able to be there. I love that for you, I must say. Okay, so speaking of growing up, you also mentioned something about teenage insecurities. I love how you added that even back in your time, we young people tend to have the certain insecurities, and you mentioned a particular word where you said you were on the fringes of the cool kids in
Yes.
school.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for you?
I think I was on the fringes for most of my life. In a way, I looked like I was inside, but I always felt like I was peering in from the outside. And it wasn't until, even as an entrepreneur, when we won awards as an entrepreneur, but I still battled imposter syndrome. And it wasn't until I became a vulnerable storyteller and I told my story on stage and people cried that I finally felt this is who I truly am. This is completely congruent. I am this person. That is when there was no faking it. There was no hiding. There was no armor. And I could finally feel, like you started the conversation, that I belonged to myself. And it was only when I belonged to myself that I could truly let others in. I had people, I kept people at bay for most of my life. Even with my children, I have a much closer relationship with my children now because I have less armor on. That's really the truth of the journey.
Hmm. I love that. I also found it powerful that years later, at your school's 40 years anniversaries or the reunion, you realize that even the people you once admired were
Yes.
carrying their own pain and insecurity, and it was just like, oh, I think I was just overthinking this thing. So, did writing these
Yes.
reflections change how you view your younger self?
Yes. At that reunion, I mean, I'd, put this wonderful friend of mine on a pedestal, and I thought she was in
Yeah.
such pain and we didn't know it. There were other people in my school in such painful environments. We all kind of hid our pain and just survived. And so I think it's wonderful. And I love speaking at schools because I love, in your teenage years, it's such a painful time. And you think you're the only awkward, strange, nerdy. I was spotty, plump, not like the rest of my family, as you know. And so when you share that, it makes so many of the people that don't do well at school sometimes do really well after school. And I think it's so important for us to bring these kind of stories to young people growing up, to make them feel less alone, to make them feel that they belong. So I have a passion to share my story with people so that they can start younger, feeling that sense of, we all just going on a journey. Some people, and then when I worked as an entrepreneur with these often very wealthy clients and massive houses, and it all looked so glamorous, you get to know them a little bit better. And there's often a lot of painful stories in the past. And we all carry stories in our soul. And it's easy to look at other people and think they've got it all sewn together. And I think what my story does, it strips back the layers of that apparent, you've got it together, to even high-performing people or successful people or apparently successful people have got their own journey, their own pain, their own nuances, their own complexities. And once we kinder with one another, we make a kinder world.
Me too. Yeah. I love that aspect. So before we move on, you also spoke about your mom. You wrote about your mom. Her presence in the book was incredibly moving. You describe,
Yes.
how your father was dominant publicly. He was, he was active in a lot of things. Your mom seems to shrink in submission. And I could
Yes.
remember in the beginning of the book, she was also an active woman before the whole marriage dynamic came into the picture. So I would just want to ask, what do you think about how women in our generation were taught and how it's different from women in your generation? So how's it like for you?
Well, I think my journey with my mother was really, I always felt like a little bit of a disappointment to her, which other people find strange, but I battled that not good enoughness. And I think now there's so much more, and she had a hard life, losing her father young, losing her brother.
Yes, losing my
But
brother.
she was suffused with sadness. There was deep sadness in her soul. And yet through that all, she gave to so many other people. So I think one of the most difficult parts of my book was writing about her passing. And because my father had been the dynamic, charismatic, larger than life, dramatic
Yes.
influence in my life, but she was the quiet, faithful one, very humble. And
Yes.
she left a lot of lessons in her legacy. And I hope I honored both of them. And I think in terms of young people today, I think there's so much more ability to speak about things. Like I never really could speak to my mom very intimately. I battled to have, I could speak about certain things, but I couldn't get raw. I couldn't get really, so, and I think that's what I write about in her passing, that in her passing, there was this exchange between us. And it was
Yes.
really, that was almost the start of my writing journey, is looking into that mirror and saying, who are you now? Who are you now? And that was when I started a really humble journey of returning to my deep faith and trying to find my way differently. So my mother had a huge impact in my life. More quiet, but in a
Yes.
way, very, very confronting
Yes.
in her gentleness. in her passing. And I think we can learn something from that, from the older generation. And we equally, as the older generation, can learn so much from the younger generation who just often have just so much to give us in our direction.
Yes, it's true, we do. It's always, I like the way you said at the beginning of the sitting where you think, or you just you think she sees you as a disappointment, but in the actual sense she's just going through her own sadness, and how she's trying to navigate through it. I love that. Speaking of faith, faith seems to be a major role in your healing journey, right from you discovering about the Baptist church, one of the first places where you ever truly felt accepted. I love that. So, why do you think this environment gave you a sense of belonging that you struggle to find somewhere else?
That's a wonderful question. Because there, everybody was welcome. And we were just children of God. And there was just the warmth and the hymns and we went to campsites, and nobody looked at my weight, whether I was big or small. They just loved me for who I was. So that journey started my faith. But at the age of 19, when I attended the Anglican Students' Conference under Desmond Tutu, who was not well known at all then, which people find quite interesting, it became like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in a different form. As a young 19-year-old in the height of apartheid, and students of color telling us what they'd gone through just getting to the conference. One woman had been physically molested by a security police, and we sat there with tears streaming down our eyes. And so that deeply moved me and shaped me. I think what happened was that in my entrepreneurial journey, even after the fraud, internal fraud, which was devastating, I then sort of lost my way, and my faith was a little bit distant. And really it was my mother's passing that confronted me. And that's where my real faith journey really started 7 years ago. And that's really where this whole sense that God has placed this message in your heart. The story is not about you. The story is for others. This is your gift to South Africa. This is your gift to be a bridge builder, to be a reconciler. And maybe your story can be a global message, as you so beautifully wrote in your synopsis of the book, which was so beautifully written. I was so moved by the way you really captured the spirit of the book. I think you really captured just the whole essence of the book so remarkably. So my faith journey deepened. And honestly, since I started the book, writing it, I think it's my faith. I think, that third time I stood above the bin with this book, the manuscript, I think it was my faith that pulled me through to the other side, honestly.
I love that. Speaking of South Africa, one aspect of the memoir I love was your reflection on growing up as a white South African, especially during apartheid. You experienced it, you lived through it, and even from where you were young, when your dad used to, take you on a stroll and you used to talk about it. So you grew up with that. Do you think that shaped your political awareness of it? Because it was deeply reflective. You were not being defensive. It's more like you see that this is a problem and this is our country. We need to, we need to get rid of this problem. So how did that shape your political journey for you?
Yes. No, that definitely, from the age of 6.
Yes.
I think because I was such a sensitive child, because I was so withdrawn, I was quiet, I was not sporty. So I was very much the observer. I watched,
Yes.
I saw, heard people's pain. I saw people's pain. I saw the madness of it all. And I think you remember that bit about when I boarded the bus, and I had
Yes.
the courage to board the bus that was marked clearly, non-whites only in the height
No,
of the apartheid.
yes, in the heart
Yeah.
of it.
And later on in the book, there's a beautiful passage about riding with my dear friend Mill, who was a political activist with me in the union movement, and
Yes.
how, I mean, there's a beautiful passage there, which I think is really kind of at the heart of the book, that I could never know. I mean, let me just see the words here, because I think it's important. There was a tiny bit there where it said, I would never know what it was like. She said, we can't go in there. And I suddenly realized, well, I never knew. I could never, at that moment, I just want to read this one sentence. At that moment, I understood that I could never understand what it's like to grow up classified by the color of my skin, not as an unspoken privilege, but as a box that defined one as being less than, not worthy of a seat at the clubhouse table. And that is a metaphor for this book. I believe that's a
Yes,
metaphor for this book. And the
it
most
is.
beautiful thing happened out of this book. And honestly, this was probably, for me, the most meaningful part of this book, was at a very emotional book launch in Cape Town. I invited my political activist friends who I hadn't seen for 30 years because I hadn't had the courage to face them because of the shame in my soul. But I knew that I could face them with this book because this book was wading through the shame to tell their
Yes,
stories,
to
not
tell
just
the
mine.
story.
And Merle
Yes.
was there. Merle was there. And Merle and I have since reunited, and we see when we talk regularly. That has been possibly one of the greatest gifts of this book.
It
Really.
is, it is. I just thought because when as a Nigerian, as a black, when we hear about apartheid, we see it from uh the blacks. But I just love the fact that you were very, very aware and you were politically inclined enough that this is a problem, and you were very reflective about it that you never realized how this thing could affect people. I just thought I was aware you have of the whole situation, how you wanted to make a change so well. It's a beautiful thing, and I think your political friends, whether black or white, we were so proud of you with the fact that you made that. You didn't make it about yourself. It wasn't an autobiography, right? But you didn't make it about yourself. You made it. This is our problem. It's everyone's problem, and I think that's a very beautiful that's I think that's even the heart, just like what you said, the heart of the book. It speaks so
Yes.
much about who you are as a person. So I think I love that. I love that. Hmm.
Thank you.
So I would also like to add that did this writing this book, is there any difference between living through history and later understanding the moral and emotional weight of that history? How did your understanding of South Africa evolve as you grew older?
As I grew older,
Yes.
well, when we were young, we were just in it. And I remember at the
Yes.
age of 6 going to the orphanage, my father taking me to Dachau concentration camp. That was a chilling, chilling parallel of South Africa. It was chilling at the time because most people were just acting like it was normal. And I was like, how can this be normal? And so, yeah, that there were just certain key points along the way that it was like the scales dropping off my eyes more and more. And the more I became part of the activist community, the more I really didn't feel like I belonged in the white community. It was like I slept there at night, but that wasn't where I belonged. So it was a very schizophrenic existence. But the schizophrenia reflected the schizophrenia of our society. And so I think my journey deepened of understanding as I grew. And the interesting thing is, when I became an entrepreneur, I wasn't your traditional entrepreneur at all. I wasn't there to make money. It wasn't interested in driving cars. Not even, it was about creating jobs and making a difference. Because I was an activist, it was about serving and about community and about collaboration. And I think that's what made us so unusual. And that's what made our company succeed, because of the values that I was seeing. And my husband also had worked in Africa, Uganda, Pakistan, Europe, and he was also an incredibly humble man, always trying to empower people, always trying to uplift people. So that was our ethos. So I think that thread is really beautiful, the way it comes through in the book. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I genuinely think you growing up in such a divided era and trying to make a change, shaped your sensitivity towards outsider, people. I think it just makes you feel the more eagerness to help people because you see things happening and you see how people live through this moment. So I'd also like to ask, how were you able to navigate writing about that period in the whole honest form while remaining some respectful experiences, especially the ones that annoy you? You're really yours to tell. How were you able to, just balance it with talking about it honestly and also trying to, be respectful with the experience? Because it felt so, it just felt so surreal. It felt so real. It felt so natural, like I was living through this moment. So how were you able to find the balance?
I think it was holding the pain, exploring it, reflecting it, extracting the wisdom, and then the wisdom superseded the pain. But I had to almost write through the pain, and sometimes the first version wasn't the same as the second or the third or the fourth version of that particular story. So I really curated the story to go deeper, and I kind of really dug deep to be as raw and honest, but also respectful and loving as I could be. And I think that's the real journey for us as writers, to be ready to be that raw and yet make it a beautiful, evocative read for somebody else. And it's that tension that really creates the sculpture. Yeah. The sculpture of words. I call it a sculpture of words.
Structure of words. Do you think people spend so much of their lives trying to belong to places where was never meant for them?
Yes. And I think part of my journey is also, we have a season where we belong there. And then you feel a little bit of discomfort and you kind of almost know. And somebody even said to me once in this journey, she said to me, it was in around my 60s when I was becoming the public face of the company. And she said to me, it was an absolute crossroads of my life. And she said to me, you will know when it's time to let go of that season. And so my whole journey has been seasons. And I think I've just come to the end of a 7-year season as a coach, a speaker, and now a writer. And it's almost like I'm standing at the precipice of an unknown next season. But I'm leaning into it with faith to be guided how my voice can be a voice of reconciliation in a world divided, in a world fractured, polarized, and in a world at war.
That's beautiful. Speaking about entrepreneurship, how was the journey like for you? And, I know you said what motivated you was trying to help people, seeing a problem and trying to solve the problem. But what was the journey like for you?
It was quite terrifying. Almost as terrifying as writing my book, to be honest. But it was...
Which is more terrifying? Which was worse?
I think the book was more
because
terrifying.
you did it. Oh, but you did it regardless. So, I
Yes,
mean,
but in the entrepreneurship, you kind of in it whether you like it or not. I mean, I became an entrepreneur
yes.
not by design, but rather by default to support my husband in his
Hmm.
dreams. And then I became the public face of the company because he was the more technical one. I mean, I didn't expect that, but it just became that. And I had to speak at architects' events, and that was quite
Hmm.
hard for me because I'm quite a shy, private person in some respects.
Person.
Yeah. So in a way, it forced me to kind of come out of myself, whether I liked it or not. I just had to. So sometimes
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur, you just kind of you just have to put one foot in front of the other. The same as after the fraud. We literally had to put one foot in front of the other, and I just had to get through another day. It was so painful for 2 years. So yeah, that was the journey of entrepreneurship. It was a roller coaster. I think I reflect that in the book. It was a roller coaster
Yes.
ride.
You
But
did.
did it give me some tools? And that's why I think I'm so passionate about giving back in speaking and writing, because I think this our country and Africa, the whole of Africa, is we entrepreneurial literacy and financial literacy is so important to this continent that if I could play a
It
role
is.
of telling my story so honestly and so rawly that people kind of got it. Because sometimes, some people say to me, you should write a business book. Well, I wrote a business book from the soul. It's not a business book, but it's a business book, if you know what I mean. Because
Yeah.
that was my soul journey
Yes.
of an innocent young woman
You
trying to
lived through
find a way
it.
as an entrepreneur. And so I think the lessons that I learned along the way about first impressions, about serving, about so many things, I think lie at the heart of the book. So I think it's not just a memoir, it's very much of an educational book. And that's why I'm so passionate about speaking
It
at
is.
schools, speaking at colleges, because I feel that's why my story matters. The lessons matter. It's not about me, but the
The
lessons
lessons
matter.
it does.
And
It
those
does.
lessons have so many parallels. Whether you had a fraud or whether you had your major contract, whatever your crash is, we all get crashes all the way along the line in entrepreneurship and in life. We crash. And I think learning how to navigate through the crashes, as my beautiful friend Nikki Bush says, who wrote the beautiful prelude in the book. And she's had an incredibly remarkable life. And she said,
Yes.
the crashes are not a full stop, they're just a comma. And you have to walk through the comma
Hmm.
in order to find your
Yeah.
way. And so I think that's what my book reflects, is that roller coaster. Every dip, every mountain where we soared, every award we got, and every crash we found ourselves back in, really, really dire straits. Every bit
Hmm.
strengthened our muscle of wisdom. It strengthened our muscle of structure. And after that fraud, we had a business coach for 13 years who really, really took us on a journey of becoming. And we became a far better company, excellent systems, excellent structures. But in that process of walking through that fraud, where, as you know, our bookkeeper took us for the equivalent of 25 million rand in today's currency.
Wow.
And so some
Yeah.
people would have been angry and bitter. I wasn't angry
Hmm.
and bitter at all. Not my husband either. We're just not angry, bitter people. We were like, we didn't have that much financial background, but we had a huge heart to serve. And so that process of overcoming that, and in that process, we had to rebuild our marriage, and I had to rebuild myself. And that became my greatest gift because then I went on a health journey. And then the health journey led me to becoming a speaker, writer, coach. So it's incredible when I look back in my life. Writing this book made sense of my whole life. It was joining the dots. And that's why I encourage other people to write their memoirs, to write their stories, whether it's for their families or for whoever it's for, because it helps you heal and make sense of your journey. That's really what it's been about for me.
It is, because you don't even know, you don't even realize how you've lived so many lives and how grateful you should be of your growth until you write a journal or a memoir, just like what you said. Yeah. I just realized two things just from what you were saying and while I was reading the book. I learned two things. The influence of relationship, especially marriage. What you just said about your husband, how you grew together and the entrepreneurship in your business. And even when you had like a setback, you were able to grow out of it because you said you're not bitter people, you're not sad people. Things like this could, break marriages. I've seen people who, even with the fact that they started business together, they just one little thing will happen and to just break them apart, including their marriage or let's say friendship in some cases. So I love how you were able to figure that out with your husband. So it reminds me of something. How was it important? How was it important for you to find your husband? Because even in the book, when you described him, you just described him as someone where you just felt this sense of belonging with him right from the moment. So how were you able to realize that? And, especially for we young women, how you're able to navigate it. This is who I want to be, and this is who I want to spend that moment with. So, just give us tips, being young women.
Okay. In the beginning, we were kind of friends,
Yes.
and we were older. We'd both traveled, we both lived, and we both had a sense of not belonging in our own families. My husband's battled severe dyslexia. He battled.
Yes, you mentioned that how he didn't have the most, but yes.
Yeah. And so we kind of found one another and we helped one another heal and grow. So my advice, and then we grew more and our relationship got deeper, deeper, deeper. In the last 7 years, we became incredibly close. So, people meet us on the plane, they think we're newlyweds, they think we're second marriage or third marriage, because it is like a second marriage. Because after the fraud, I became a different person. And so my message to young people starting out is find somebody who understands what love truly is. And my husband's definition of love is beautiful. He said to me one day, he's not a man of many words. He shows his love in actions. But he said to me the one day, my definition of love is making your life beautiful. Serving. And I thought that was just the most beautiful definition of love I've ever heard. Because if you find somebody who wants to grow in such deep partnership, that you're not defending yourself, you're not trying to explain yourself, they're with you on a journey, and you're there to grow one another in love and gentleness and compassion. And I would say, don't rush into finding belonging with the right person. Know what belonging looks like. And then you will be far more likely find somebody who's going to belong to you, but belong to themselves. And when you have shared values, shared beliefs, shared vision, how you parent, it's not a war. People say to me, how do you work with your husband? Mine would drive me nuts. I get that all the time. Like, how do you? And I say, well, we love working together. We're a tapestry. He does his thing and we weave this incredible life together. And so that's really been a journey, but it's been a deepening journey. And it wasn't like that in the beginning. We loved one another in a very kind of companionable way, but now we love one another in a passionate, deeply wise and rooted way to serve our reason for being here while we're on this earth. And if you find a partner that's willing to partner with you on that level of mission and vision, then you have got gold. But you also have to become the kind of person that is better, wiser. And I think I became a much nicer person after my health journey and now my deepening journey. And it's reflected. It's reflected in our relationship. Yeah.
I love that. I love how you had that for you to be fully aware of someone who can like bring impact into your life. You also have to, have that realization, be self-aware, be deeply reflective. I love how you said you have to go through your journey, your head journey to realize, okay, I could be a better person. I could be a better writer. I could be a coach. That's interesting. That's interesting. So it brings me
And
back to
I
the
became
book.
a better, sorry,
You
and I
become a
became a
what?
better mother. I became a
A
better mother.
oh, that's interesting. I love that. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it brings me back to the book because, while you're writing the book and, you said something about encouraging people to write their memoir. But,
Yeah.
how do you balance out to, not reveal too much? And so what chapter or memory in the book was the hardest for you to write?
Writing about the shame of letting down my union comrades was very hard. And writing about my mother's passing was very hard. That was the rawest part. That was the
I felt
rawest
that part
part.
too.
So yeah.
Mm.
And I had to be that raw if the book was going to be that real. I couldn't skirt over that.
Yes.
I didn't write about that in the first version of the book. I didn't have that in. So the journey got a lot deeper. And I wrote
It got
about
a
the
lot
fraud in the beginning.
deeper.
Yeah. I think the first version of the book, I was dipping into courage. The second version, there was
Yes.
nothing left to hide. There was nothing left to hide.
Let
And
it
I
all.
knew I had to give it 120% of everything I had.
You let it out. I love that part. With talking about loss, because I've also lost my dad. I felt that
Yeah.
part deeply because it was like I'm glad you added that in because I mean, as human, we experience grief, and it shaped us more than we could realize. And I just like that you added that to it. And you spoke about throughout the book, you mentioned friendship. Friendship plays a very important role. Even before you married your husband, he was your friend. So some friendship gave you confidence, some taught you painful lessons, and some just became an emotional lifeline. So what has friendship taught you about belonging?
Friendship has taught me so much about belonging because really, if you look at neuroscience and frequency, then even in a season, when people see you for who you truly are, truly see your spirit,
Yes.
it shifts something in you that you don't feel so alone. And so I'm a very relational person. I live in relationships. Friendships mean everything to me. I'm incredibly loyal. And because I battled so much not belonging when I was younger, that's why maybe I treasure every single friendship I have at such a deep level. And as I say, there's seasons where some friendships are really important, and then maybe people leave the country or they go overseas and things change. But really, I think so many people in the world today battle with feeling alone. We're living in an age of social media and phones And we're all connected to the world, yet so many people feel like they don't belong. They actually feel alone. So
Yes,
it's a
I agree.
paradox. We're living in a paradox that everybody's connected and so many people feel lonely. And I think the book tries to
Hmm.
really get to the heart of that join organizations, contribute to society. You know, it's when I became involved in the speaker community, I formed such deep, remarkable friendships. Those people gave me the courage to write this book. I don't think I would have written this book without my book coach, Kim Famark, was just extraordinary. She held my hand through every inch of this book, 2 emotional book launches. That friendship is something you can't even put into words. This award is partly an award for her and Nikki and Jabu and all the other people in my book that touched my life at such a deep core. That's why the heart of this book is about friendship. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. I love that. So we're running out of time. It's already past an hour, but I mean, I will still have some questions, but I'll just try as much as possible to round it up. But let's play our second game. Remember, we're supposed to have another game.
Yes. Now I'm a bit
Okay,
more
so
relaxed
let's
to
just
play
get
the game.
started.
Oh,
Okay, are you ready?
yes.
Okay, would you rather bring back a beautiful childhood memory or one beautiful adult memory?
A beautiful adult memory.
Why? I was thinking.
Because my childhood was quite tortured, but the
Hmm.
joy in my becoming later was the healing of those wounds. So that's why I would celebrate.
Hmm. Love that. Love that. Okay. Would you rather revisit every place you once belonged or discover completely new tribes?
New tracks, because I've lived my
Uh,
life as the road less traveled.
hmm. Okay. Okay. Let's say. Would you rather write another memoir or a fictional novel next?
Or a fiction.
A fictional novel next.
I think I would write a different form of autobiography
Oh,
because I think I write best different nuances, different eras, different messages. Because I feel I'm most true as a writer when I'm writing from my deepest emotion. So I think it would be elements of my life story differently told.
wow. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay.
Mm.
Would you rather live near the mountains or oceans?
I love both, but I am an ocean person, even though I don't live by the ocean anymore. But I feel
Oh,
deeply drawn to the ocean. And the ocean is in the cover of my book.
yeah,
And
yes,
I often talk about blue ocean thinking, meaning going to the
yeah.
depths of your soul when you write. So, ocean.
Okay, okay. So last one. Would you rather live in a cozy cabin in the woods or a vibrant apartment in a bustling city?
Cabin in the woods.
I thought as much.
Didn't have to guess that one. Hey. Oh,
Okay. All right. So let me ask you some, just few questions because we're running out of time, like I said. So looking back now, what do you think younger Alison needed the most?
she needed to feel less alone. She felt so lonely. So, such an outsider.
Hmm.
such an outsider. Like I just was an observer of other people's lives. Yeah.
Oh, so after writing this book, how did your people around you, the community, react to this book? And what was the you were expecting, did that meet your expectation, or it's something different? They reacted differently to what you wrote.
I gave it my all. As you know,
What?
I gave it my
Yes.
all and I poured every inch
Yes,
into
you
it.
did.
And I was so worried about family, how would they respond? And so I was kind of treading on eggshells this journey. But in the process, it has been such a healing journey. And I think some people have said to me, your book changed my life. It changed my self-perception. And when I hear that, every time I hear that, it just makes every bit worthwhile of the anguish of the journey. And I was still wondering whether the book was really worthy because it didn't seem to be selling too much at exclusive. So I'd kind of almost given up on the book. And then your nomination
Hmm.
came through. Then your nomination came through. And then I thought,
Hmm.
those are the people that I wanted to read my book, is literary people who would get the depths to which I had written. And so
Yes.
that's been my journey of healing. Because honestly, I'd kind of written the book,
Hmm.
I'd done everything, I'd done the book launches, I'd been on, I think I was in 80 global interviews, podcasts. I really tried to kind
Wow.
of capture the spirit of the book. And then I don't think the book was selling. So I didn't think, I started to doubt. When I wrote it, I had a very strong sense that this message really matters. And my book coach kept on saying to me, your message really matters, Ali. It matters for this country. It
Matters.
matters for the
It
world.
does.
And so this was a journey. And it's only now that I really can look back and say, all the anguish, all the pain, all the self-doubt. Sometimes the visibility was hard because you know my story. And, we're going through that court case, the first one, then the second court case around the
Yes.
fraud. Visibility is very scary for me. And yet I became quite visible
Yes.
in the book. And some people were quite judgmental about my visibility. So I was walking this quite difficult journey of being brave, putting myself out there and feeling like, so I think that's really where the healing has come. And I want you to know that Tala has been part of my healing. I want you to know that.
Oh,
I really want you to know
we'll
that from the bottom of my heart, because it's like you saw the depth of my story and you made me finally feel like my story mattered. And that has meant
It
the
does.
world to me.
It does. Thank you. Thank you. I was just about to ask, how did you feel winning the award? But I think you mentioned that, or do you want to add more to it?
Sorry, I didn't hear
So
you.
I was just about to ask you, how did you feel winning the award? But I think you've mentioned that
Oh,
already. But did you want to add more to it?
yes. I could just add that I was in a fabric store with my interior decorator friend who was an entrepreneur, lifelong friend for many, many years. And she was busy sorting out fabrics. And I just checked my emails because she was busy with something, and the nomination came through. Well, I burst into tears in the fabric shop, and everybody came and said, what's going on? Shane, what's going on? That's what happened. That's the truth. And because
Hmm.
when I got the nomination, I didn't want to hang any expectations on it. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody I'd been nominated because I wanted to see, it was a journey of faith. I wanted to see, where is this going to? This is no longer in my hands. This is now in another realm. And so when
Yes.
I got that notification that I had won this award, it was life-changing, life-altering. After 4 years of questioning whether my story really mattered. Thank you for what you've done for me.
No, it's a well-deserved award, I must say. Oh, we have less than 1 minute before this time ends, so let me just close this up. But really enjoyed this conversation, and I would really love to ask more. I would have loved to ask more questions about your political journey. And you studied sociology. I also studied sociology, by the way. So I'd have loved to ask more questions about that. But I mean, I guess we'll have another time to talk about it. Thank you so much for joining us in the Laureate Conversation. Your memoir was honest. It was thoughtful, vulnerable. It was deeply human. I felt living through your journey with you. I felt it myself. I learned a lot of things, about entrepreneurship, about, just holding on to your shame, living past it, just, becoming a better person, learning so much more about yourself. So belonging, finding tribes of meaning, it's deeply reflective, and it just reminds us that belonging is not always about popularity, about doing the most. It's just about you. It's just about you being accepted and finding peace within yourself. So thank you so much for that, Alison. We're so glad to have you here. And thank you to everyone watching. See you in the next episode.